The National Assembly for Wales is a devolved assembly with power to make legislation in Wales. It is commonly also known as the Welsh Assembly. The Assembly comprises 60 members, who are known as Assembly members, or AMs. Since 2011, members are elected for 5-year terms under an additional members system, where 40 AMs represent geographical constituencies elected by the plurality system, and 20 AMs represent 5 electoral regions using the DONT method of proportional representation. The Assembly was created by the Government of Wales Act 1998, which followed a referendum in 1997. The Assembly had no powers to initiate primary legislation until limited lawmaking powers were gained through the Government of Wales Act 2006. Its primary lawmaking powers were enhanced following a yes vote in the referendum on 3 March 2011, making it possible for it to legislate without having to consult the UK Parliament of the Secretary of State for Wales in the 20 areas that are devolved. History. Road to the Assembly. An appointed council for Wales and Monmouthshire was established in 1949 to ensure the government is adequately informed of the impact of government activities on the general life of the people of Wales. The council had 27 members nominated by local authorities in Wales, the University of Wales, National Eisteddfod Council and the Welsh Tourist Board. A post of Minister of Welsh Affairs was created in 1951 and the post of Secretary of State for Wales and the Welsh Office were established in 1964, leading to the abolition of the Council for Wales. The establishment of the Welsh Office effectively created the basis for the territorial governance of Wales. The Royal Commission on the Constitution was set up in 1969 by Harold Wilson's Labour government to investigate the possibility of devolution for Scotland and Wales. Its recommendations formed the basis of the 1974 White Paper Democracy and Devolution Proposals for Scotland and Wales, which proposed the creation of a Welsh Assembly. However, voters rejected the proposals by a majority of 4-1 in a referendum held in 1979. After the 1997 general election, the new Labour government argued that an assembly would be more democratically accountable than the Welsh Office. For 11 years prior to 1997, Wales had been represented in the Cabinet of the United Kingdom by a Secretary of State who did not represent a Welsh constituency at Westminster. A second referendum was held on the 18th of September 1997 in which voters approved the creation of the National Assembly for Wales by a majority of 559,419 votes, or 50.3% of the vote. The following year, the Government of Wales Act was passed by the United Kingdom Parliament establishing the Assembly. In July 2002, the Welsh Government established an independent commission, with Lord Richard as chair, to review the powers and electoral arrangements of the National Assembly in order to ensure that it is able to operate in the best interests of the people of Wales. The Richard Commission reported in March 2004. It recommended that the National Assembly should have powers to legislate in certain areas, whilst others would remain the preserve of Westminster. It also recommended changing the electoral system to the single transferable vote, which would produce greater proportionality. In response, the British government, in its Better Governance for Wales White Paper, published on 15 June 2005, proposed a more permissive lawmaking system for the Welsh Assembly based on the use of parliamentary orders in council. In so doing, the government rejected many of the cross-party Richard Commission's recommendations. This has attracted criticism from opposition parties and others. Enhanced powers. The Government of Wales Act 2006. The Government of Wales Act 2006 received royal assent on 25 July 2006. It conferred on the Assembly legislative powers similar to other devolved legislatures through the ability to pass Assembly measures concerning matters that are devolved. Requests for further legislative powers made through legislative competence requests were subject to the veto of the Secretary of State for Wales. House of Commons or House of Lords. The Act reformed the Assembly to a parliamentary-type structure, establishing the Welsh Government as an entity separate from, but accountable to the National Assembly. It enables the Assembly to legislate within its devolved fields. The Act also reforms the Assembly's electoral system. It prevents individuals from standing as candidates in both constituency and regional seats. This aspect of the Act was subject to a great deal of criticism, most notably from the Electoral Commission. The Act was heavily criticised. Plaid Cymru, the official opposition in the National Assembly from 1999 to 2007, attacked it for not delivering a fully fledged parliament. Many commentators have also criticised the Labour Party's allegedly partisan attempt to alter the electoral system by preventing regional assembly members from standing in constituency seats. The party has been accused of changing the rules to protect constituency representatives. Labour had 29 members in the Assembly at the time, all of whom held constituency seats. The changes to the Assembly's powers were commenced on 4 May 2007, after the election. Following a referendum on 3 March 2011, the Welsh Assembly gained direct lawmaking powers, without the need to consult Westminster. Future devolution. Following recommendations by the Silk Commission, the UK government announced in November 2013 that some borrowing powers are to be devolved to the Assembly, along with control of landfill tax and stamp duty. Additionally, the Wales Act 2014 provides for a referendum to be held on the Assembly's ability to set a degree of income tax. Buildings. Senedd. The debating chamber in Cardiff Bay. The Senedd was designed by the Richard Rogers Partnership and built by Taylor Woodrow, with environmental and MEP design by BDSP Partnership. It uses traditional Welsh materials, such as slate and Welsh oak, in its construction, and the design is based around the concepts of openness and transparency. The timber ceiling and center funnel, manufactured and installed by BCL Timber Projects, is made from Canadian-sourced Western red cedar. The Senedd houses the debating chamber and committee rooms. It was officially opened by Queen Elizabeth II on St. David's Day, 1 March 2006. The Senedd is designed to be environmentally friendly. It uses an earth heat exchange system for heating. Rainwater is collected from the roof and used for flushing toilets and cleaning windows. And the roof features a wind cowl which funnels natural light and air into the debating chamber below. Ty Howell and Pierhead. Building. The debating chamber was initially based in Ty Howell, next to the site of the present building. The offices of Assembly members are still in this building, which is connected to the Senedd by a skyway. The National Assembly for Wales Commission is also responsible for the Pierhead building, which is the location of the Assembly at the Pierhead exhibition, and is the visitor and education centre for the National Assembly for Wales, as well as housing a small gift shop. The exhibition provides visitors with a unique opportunity to access the most up-to-date information on who's who, what's happening and how the Assembly works. North Wales Office. The North Wales Information Centre is located in Colwyn Bay, and the office is open to the public to access information about the Welsh Assembly. Elected officials. After each election, the Assembly elects one Assembly member to serve as presiding officer, and another to serve as a deputy. Rosemary Butler, Labour AM, has been presiding officer since the beginning of the 2011 to 2016 term, having taken over from Daffod Ellis-Thomas. Lord Ellis-Thomas, Plaid Cymru AM, had been presiding officer since the Assembly's creation, standing down from the post in 2011. Butler had been his deputy since 2007. The presiding officer also acts as chair of the National Assembly for Wales Commission. Both the presiding officer and the deputy presiding officer are expected not to vote. Elin Jones, Plaid Cymru Assembly member for Ceredigion, was elected the new presiding officer after the May 2016 elections. Permanent officials. The permanent administrative and support staff of the Welsh Assembly are employed by the Assembly Commission. They are not civil servants, although they enjoy similar terms and conditions of service to members of the UK civil service. Powers and status. The National Assembly consists of 60 elected members. They use the title Assembly Member or Aelodweithsmwliad. The executive arm of the National Assembly for Wales, the Welsh Government, has been a Labour administration led by First Minister Carwyn Jones since May 2011. The previous administration had been a coalition between Labour, led by First Minister Carwyn Jones, and Plaid Cymru, led by Deputy First Minister Iwan Wyn Jones, from December 2009 until May 2011. The executive and civil servants are mainly based in Cardiff's Kitte's Park, while the Assembly members, the Assembly Commission and ministerial support staff are based in Cardiff Bay, where a new £67 million Assembly building, known as the Senedd, has been built. One important feature of the National Assembly until 2007 was that there was no legal or constitutional separation of the legislative and executive functions, since it was a single corporate entity. Compared with other parliamentary systems and arrangements for devolution in other countries of the UK, this was unusual. In practice, however, there was separation of functions, and the terms Assembly and Assembly Parliamentary Service came into use to distinguish between the two arms. The Government of Wales Act 2006 regularised the separation when it came into effect following the 2007 Assembly election. Initially, the Assembly did not have primary legislative or fiscal powers, as these powers were reserved by Westminster. The Assembly did have powers to pass secondary legislation in devolved areas. Sometimes secondary legislation could be used to amend primary legislation, but the scope of this was very limited. For example, the first Government of Wales Act gave the Assembly power to amend primary legislation relating to the merger of certain public bodies. However, most secondary powers were conferred on the executive by primary legislation to give the executive more powers, and the Assembly has had wider legislative powers than appearances might suggest. For example, the Assembly delayed local elections due to be held in 2003 for a year by use of secondary powers, so that they would not correspond with Assembly elections. In 2001, the UK Parliament used primary legislation to delay for 1 month local elections in England during the foot-and-mouth disease epidemic. The Assembly gained limited primary legislative powers following the 2007 election and the passage of the Government of Wales Act 2006. These laws are known as Assembly measures and can be enacted in specific fields and matters within the legislative competency of the Assembly. New matters and fields can be devolved by acts of the UK Parliament or by LCOs approved by Parliament. While in principle the Assembly has no tax-varying powers, it can influence the rate of council tax set by local authorities, which are part funded by a grant from the Welsh Government. It also has some discretion over charges for government services. Notable examples where this discretion has been used to create significant differences from other areas in the UK include charges for NHS prescriptions in Wales. These have now been abolished. Charges for university tuition are different for Welsh resident students studying at Welsh universities, compared with students from studying elsewhere in the UK. Charging for residential care in Wales. There is a flat rate of contribution towards the cost of nursing care for those who require residential care. This means in reality that there is a wider definition of nursing care than in England, and therefore less dependence on means testing in Wales than in England, meaning that more people are entitled to higher levels of state assistance. These variations in the levels of charges may be viewed as de facto tax varying powers. This model of more limited legislative powers was partly due to the fact that Wales has had the same legal system as England since 1536, when it was merged with England. Ireland and Scotland were never merged with England, and so always retained some distinct differences in the legal systems. The Scottish Parliament and the Northern Ireland Assembly both have deeper and wider powers. The Assembly inherited the powers and budget of the Secretary of State for Wales and most of the functions of the Welsh Office. It has power to vary laws passed by Westminster using secondary legislation. Stephen Crabb, who represents the constituency of Preseli, Pembrokeshire in the Westminster Parliament, is currently the Secretary of State for Wales. Following a referendum on 4 March 2011, the Welsh Assembly gained direct lawmaking powers, without the need to consult Westminster. On 3 July 2012, the Welsh Assembly passed its first act, the Local Government Bylaws Bill. Devolved areas. The National Assembly for Wales has the competence to pass bills for acts of the Assembly in 20 subjects outlined in Schedule 7 of the Government of Wales Act 2006. Those subjects are agriculture, fisheries, forestry and rural development, ancient monuments and historic buildings, culture, economic development, education and training, environment, fire and rescue services and promotion of fire safety, food, health and health services, highways and transport, housing, local government, public administration, social welfare, sport and recreation, tourism, town and country planning, water and flood defense, Welsh language, members, constituencies, and electoral system. Under mixed member proportional representation, a type of additional member system, 40 of the AMs are elected from single-member constituencies on a plurality voting system basis, the constituencies being equivalent to those used for the House of Commons, and 20 AMs are elected from regional closed lists using an alternative party vote. There are 5 regions: Mid and West Wales, North Wales, South Wales Central, South Wales East and South Wales West, each of which returns 4 members. The additional members produce a degree of proportionality within each region, whereas voters can choose any regional party list irrespective of the party vote in the constituency election. List AMs are not elected independently of the constituency element, rather, elected constituency AMs are deemed to be pre-elected list representatives for the purposes of calculating remainders in the DUNT method. Overall proportionality is limited by the low proportion of list members and the regionalization of the list element. Consequently, the Assembly as a whole has a greater degree of proportionality than the plurality voting system used for British parliamentary elections, but still deviates somewhat from proportionality. The single transferable vote system had been considered for the Assembly by the Labour Party as early as 1000. 1995-96, but according to the evidence given to the Richard Commission by Ron Davies, a former Welsh secretary, today there have been 5 elections to the Assembly in 1999, 2003, 2007, 2011 and 2016 elections. There have been 5 elections to the Assembly in 1999, 2003, 2007, 2011 and 2016. The 2016 election was delayed from 2015 as the UK general election was held in 2015. Composition. Following the elections in May 2016, the composition of the Assembly changed in the most dramatic fashion since the beginning of the Assembly. Labour dropped from 30 to 29 seats, and Plaid Cymru moved from 11 to 12 seats, with Plaid's leader Leanne Wood gaining the constituency of the Rhondda. The Conservatives lost 3 seats, moving from 14 seats to 11, while the Liberal Democrats dropped from 5 seats to just 1. UKIP, who had not previously had representation, gained 7 AMs, following an initial vote in the Siambr on the First Minister, in which Plaid Cymru's Leanne Wood and Labour's Carwyn Jones both gained 29 votes from AMs each. A week of talks were held. A document was produced after Plaid Cymru Labour talks entitled Moving Wales Forward, which detailed policy concessions in exchange for allowing Carwyn Jones to become First Minister. Labour appointed Kirsty Williams as Education Secretary, meaning that the minority government is a coalition between Welsh Labour and the Welsh Liberal Democrats. Plaid Cymru formed the official opposition, with Leanne Wood becoming leader of the opposition, while the Conservatives and UKIP also form opposition groups.